Hey everybody, this is Thomas and I'm with Mike. We're the first to last in Nerdom. We're talking about Extreme X-Men. Now, this started in 2001. Chris Claremont, which is a legendary figure as far as X-Men. He wrote them for over a decade. This is his return to the X-Men in 2001. Now I know it's crazy. I love Chris Claremont. I love the X-Men. My run of X-Men with Chris Claremont is what I love. However, I don't think I actually read the Extreme X-Men when it came out with Chris Claremont. At the same time that this was coming out, there was the legendary Grant Morrison run of New X-Men that was coming out at the same time. But I don't think I actually read the Extreme X-Men with Chris Claremont. But there's a new version that came out, the omnibus of Extreme X-Men. So I've
hmm
been really enjoying it, and me and Mike are going to talk about the first one or two episode or issues of this. What's your past with X-Men, Mike?
So yeah, so this one, and I kind of boogered this up, but I got part of like one of the three comic books that we were gonna do for this thing. But we're here now, and Chris Claremont. This takes me back to when I was a kid in the '90s, and avidly loved X-Men. X-Men was the thing for me, and the artwork in this reminds me of that classic X-Men kind of feel. It has its own vibe for sure. And I never
Hmm.
read this either, to be clear. And what as we go in here and we get into this, but this just, I mean, it was just there's a few differences between what I'm used to and like what this presents for the characters. And I am not dyed in the wool understanding the differences aside from like,
Hmm.
Beast taking more of a lead, Storm taking more of a lead. Um, and kind of having these little minor characters as more main characters
Hmm.
in this, mainly Bishop. I didn't know anything about Bishop, to be honest with you.
Hmm.
But Psylocke, I always, God, growing up, I had a crush on Psylocke. I always remember that. This takes me back to the trading cards that they had, the baseball trading cards that they had. I collected those like crazy growing up as a kid. So I have very fond memories of like the holographic editions, and you go to the comic book shop and you grab your comic book and your cards, and you come home and just little, you break open the foil, and then kind of put them, and then reorganize them and organize them
Hmm.
endlessly, and then kind of pull out your favorite storybooks or whatnot from that time. Wolverine as
Hmm.
well. Now this Rogue, um, and I'm not quite too clear on why, but this rogue has some of Wolverine's powers, and I'm not quite sure why, and that's okay because I don't need to know. But that kind of forces me or causes me to like want to figure out why. So like that'll be a natural mystery as we kind of roll through this. The only one missing that I really missed was Nightcrawler.
Hmm.
But then again, there's no Cyclops and there's no Jean Grey. This is like a classic X-Men, I guess.
Hmm.
Kind of alternate X-Men, I guess. I don't know. I am not an X-Men nut bag, so I can't do justice to it other than like X-Men '92, and that's another joy when I was growing up as a kid. But anyway, without further
Yeah.
ado, it hit all the fills when I started to go through these, and I was
Yeah.
really happy to see. And we'll be bringing more of this kind of content to you as well,
Yeah.
for some other penultimate ones that Thomas really wants to dig in on, and I'm excited too because like it's really cool and awesome, because it kind of highlights why X-Men is so good and popular and awesome as it stands. Period. Um, but in any case,
Yeah.
without further ado, yeah, those are my feels for it.
Yeah. Yeah. If you want to kind of just jump into the artwork on it, but yeah, it's yeah, was his sort of return towards X-Men, and he wanted to maybe tell sort of a story that wasn't tied to all of the other X-Men storylines that were going on at the time. He wanted to tell his own stories without um tying it in and making sure it fit in with everything else that was going on at the time. So I think he pretty much said, okay, which characters can I use to
Hmm.
tell a story? And he really loves all of the X-Men characters. So whichever ones that he could get a hold of, he was happy to do storylines with. So I think with the start, he had like Psylocke, Storm, he had Bishop, and then he had some newer characters like the newer version of Thunderbird and Sage, which was a older character, but was with the Hellfire Club.
Hmm.
If you remember back in the day, she was a bad guy that was actually in disguise at the time. So yeah, and also Rogue was a character as well that he used in this. And Rogue at this particular time, and again, I wasn't reading X-Men at this time because I stopped reading X-Men when Chris Claremont stopped writing it. I was like, okay, well, my favorite writer is leaving X-Men. That's my favorite X-Men. I'm not going to read it anymore if he's leaving.
Hmm.
So yeah. But at this time, Rogue, her powers were very erratic. She was able to, if you remember, she could touch someone and absorb their powers. And at this point, she could recall any of those powers, uh, but
Oh,
but she couldn't actually control them. So
okay.
like she could recall the powers of Wolverine, but that was at maybe an inopportune time. She couldn't control the powers that she was unleashing. So she was a very erratic superhero at that time. And then at the start of Extreme X-Men, they were kind of going against Charles Xavier. There was a character called Destiny that could see the future, and she had
Right.
written down the futures in these books.
Right.
And at the start of the comic books, they were trying to look for these books that told the future, and they were trying to find them to see what the future was, and they wanted to bypass Chris Xavier or Charles Xavier because they weren't sure if he would be able to handle that type of information, being a telepath with his supreme powers. With that information, what could he do, with that? Would he go beyond what it is to be a superhero? So they wanted to find those books and kind of sort of uh kind of a splinter cell as far as the X-Men, kind of a hidden group of the X-Men to go off on their own without Charles Xavier's guidance, so that they could maybe go below the surface and be the heroes without having the oversight of Charles Xavier.
Right. Right. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm just figuring out how to work the controls here. As is like a very much a test case, but this is definitely just the artwork here, just the classic, just the coloring and everything else just gets me. It's really awesome. It's really substantial. I'm
Yeah,
just kind of
yeah, Salvador Larroca is a really great artist, and he worked with Chris Claremont on these first 24 issues of X-Treme X-Men, and he also did most of the run of Chris Claremont on Fantastic Four, which I also read, which was really good. And to tie it into the present day, book that came out last week called X-Treme X-Men. It's a new run of the series, and it's by Chris Claremont and Salvador Larroca, and it takes place right after the first 46 issues of X-Treme X-Men. So it's not in current day continuity, but it's in continuity with this comic book that took place 20 years ago. So
Right on. Right on.
so yeah, and I read the first issue. It's really good. It kind of spotlights Kitty Pryde, which is Shadowcat, her storyline. And that's one of my favorite characters when I first started reading comic books
Mhm.
and reading X-Men. That was the character I completely related with, Kitty Pryde, which kind of goes against all of the current day thinking, which is you have to have a character that's just like you to relate to.
Right, right, exactly.
Kitty
Perfectly said.
Pryde, yeah, Kitty Pryde was a teenager, which I could relate to because she was a teenager, but she was female, she was Jewish, and she
Mhm.
was from Chicago. Completely different from me, but I could relate to her because she was my same age, and she was trying to relate to a world that was more adult than she was, but she was a teenager, and that was very relatable to me. And and she's always been a character that I've been closely tied with, just because of that initial relationship. And with today's standards, that shouldn't be the case, because I shouldn't be able to relate to a female character. I should be looking for a cis white male that's just like me.
Right, right. Like this breakup of this fractional the fractional fandom that doesn't exist, that
Mhm,
like that they lost. And then this bleeds over into the real to other media too, like movies and shows, and
mhm,
we've covered that at length. But this is kind of like that thing, and the X-Men are supposed to be they're supposed to be not the Avengers. They're supposed to not be the Fantastic Four.
mhm,
They're supposed to be their own entity, their own organization that is kind of like counter, or they're a little bit more edgy, I guess. I don't know
mhm.
how to put it, like way more edgy than like the Avengers or
Yeah.
Fantastic Four, like where it's a little bit more kitschy and campy and kind of things. Not to say that there weren't serious storylines for those particular
Mhm,
comic books, but the X-Men, that's what I grew up with as well, which was like far more in a way, the Beast, Wolverine, like these
mhm.
kind of characters that like are kind of there's a sadness about them, that
Yeah.
they had like real struggles, like more so than, and they did justice to that with an Iron Man in several of his runs, like where it was like, he had a little bit more of a backstory that was a little bit more challenging and more
Mhm,
human like. But yeah,
mhm,
I echo your sentiment for sure,
mhm,
with these, and just the artwork is just good
mhm,
God. When you
mhm,
pull this up and I started looking for these, and I had to get my bearings about, just God, just such great. This is a rare treat, to
mhm.
me, in my opinion, to have
Mhm.
this level of artwork and writing, all kind of sandwiched together, and I can see why people fell in love with this. It's just great. I mean, good God, just the
Yeah.
level of detail and everything else. And Beast, oh God, I'm just kind of
Mhm.
commenting on what I see in front of me. And they weren't
Yeah.
afraid to use colors, or go lighter or darker. And you kind of
Mhm.
see that throughout as we kind of thumb through it digitally, where they did that, and they weren't afraid to use lack of color or monotone, or kind of, not
Mhm.
monotone but monochromatic, kind
Mhm.
of just going in one shade is more
Mhm.
darker than the rest. They don't have that nowadays, for sure.
Yeah,
At least
and
maybe not for my, that might be an uneducated
mhm,
opinion. As far as
mhm.
what's out there, you could definitely color me in on that for sure. A lot stronger than not.
Yeah, I think this kind of again, I don't know the the palette that the artist is working with here. But yeah, the art is very striking. I know that with it going more towards digital, the art of inking isn't as strong as it used
Mhm.
to be.
Sure.
And that's kind of lost within the genre. But
Right.
yeah, there's a very clear line that Chris Claremont has been throughout his career with the X-Men is trying to establish as far as the anti-hero and the hero, and he's very clear on the fact that the X-Men, no matter how the public looks at the X-Men, is that the X-Men have always been heroes. And
Right.
I think current day that a lot of the writers have lost that sense of the X-Men being heroes.
Mhm.
Sometimes uh, the current writers have written it to where they're more leaning towards anti-heroes, that they do things towards the just regular humans that are outright bad.
Right.
Whereas Chris Claremont has always had a clear sense of no matter who it is, even if it's Wolverine, they know deep down in their core that they are doing what is right, and they will never do anything bad towards a human being,
Right. Right. Yeah.
no
That.
matter
That.
how toxic they are. If they're
Right.
toxic, they'll school them and they'll show them how toxic they are, but they won't do anything that is harmful to that human being. Whereas I think nowadays, I think there's a sense of um there there's current day movies and current day comic books, whereas like say there's a situation where a maybe a male character, NPC character, is hitting on the superhero female character, and that female character goes above and beyond damage to that male character
Right.
just because they're being toxic. And that's not true to what Chris Claremont has done with his characters. They hold themselves to a higher standard, a hero standard, and that's what I love about this comic book.
Yeah, and to kind of go back and touch on a point that you made about this, and this is true in analog media, and this is kind of the forever conversation about analog versus digital, like electronic, that kind of thing. I want to touch on
Mhm.
that real quick. Now,
Uh-huh.
just like movies, like the original print movies, if they remaster them, they slide so easily into 4K or whatever resolution, whatever it is of the decade or time period. It slides very nicely into it for the most part. Like older movies, not a problem. Whereas, you when you shoot in 4K, you lose some of that aspect. And then there's the argument of whether they use digital cameras or actual film. But boy, you can tell the difference when they format shift them over. And that's no different when you actually have physical media and physical artwork. And I don't even know how. It would kind of be interesting to fall into a rabbit hole of how they digitize some of these things. But the ones that were made analog, the color palettes, the artwork, where it was an actual physical hand that made this artwork, and then they digitized it later on. It holds up very well,
Mhm.
and that's true, I think, for good artwork, regardless of whether it's actually digital or analog or whatever. But this analog stuff, and for all I know, this stuff could have been done digital. For all I'm sure some of it was. Because you're talking about 2000, 2001. I'm sure there was some of this stuff was digital, and it slides very nicely into it. But even the old classic, Golden Age comics, some of it translates very, very well to digital. Whereas the other way around, where it starts life as digital, and if you try to print that into a physical page nowadays, well, for one, good luck finding it. Two, good luck finding it, and three, good luck finding it. And I think that's a criticism that folks of our age kind of have with some things, like where they just get lazy for some of the artwork and some of the things. Of course, lazy artwork is always going to be lazy artwork. Great artwork is going to transcend no matter whatever format it is. But good God, just the coloring and the fidelity of detail, like this is where it translates very well to digital. And I don't mind it so much. And of course, I would prefer sometimes, if it's something I really love, to have the omnibus or whatever. And depending upon the quality of the release, maybe the quality of the page isn't there. Maybe it's too glossy. Maybe it's not glossy enough or whatever. And sometimes you miss some of that. And we've covered that a little bit too, where sometimes they'll do an omnibus or a compilation, a compendium, and it won't have the covers, which is stupid. It's really stupid and dumb and cheap when they don't do that, and I don't know why they would, but sometimes that happens. I don't know why, but I've noticed that. I don't want to drill too much on the soapbox of, like, back in my day, like, I'm sure this was digital, like back in the time, but like, I guarantee you some of these panels were physically inked. They had to been, and maybe I'm way out base of that, but however they did it holds up, for sure. I think it does anyway, and it just looks even better in digital. And when we're swooping around here and going here and there, you can just see it's just really good artwork. It holds up for sure. And it gives me, like, when I see this, like, it just, ooh, it's eye candy. It's awesome. It's really cool. I think I lost you. Hopefully I didn't. Hopefully you'll come back up online here. Oh no. Oh, can you hear me, Thomas? Well, this is live here, and we're gonna try to. I'll give Thomas here a minute to come back here. It might be too much on the network, but hopefully I can filibuster here